This video covers the instructions for the Fancy Chair Kit from Bentley House Minis in both 1/12 scale and 1/24 scale. Both of these kits come with the pieces to create the interior structure, the legs of the chairs, and they come with the quilt batting to create the comfy cushioning. However, the kit does not come with fabric. Fabric needs to be provided by the person who is completing the kit. I suggest a thin fabric, especially for the 1/24 scale chair. However, you want to make sure it's not so thin that you can see through it when it's held up against different colors. So you can check this by putting it up against a piece of cardboard and a piece of white paper to see if you can see those colors through the fabric. If you can't, we will begin with the instructions for the 1/12 scale kit. Start by gluing together 2 pieces marked C and 2 pieces marked D. You will then glue those pieces together, matching up the rounded fronts of the chair seat so that you have a piece that looks like this. They don't match exactly in the back, and that's okay. Next, we're going to glue 2 pieces marked F onto the front of piece B. You're going to make sure that the smaller side of piece F is pointing up. Then grab piece E and glue the shorter side of piece E along the edge just above the tab on piece B. Add glue to all the exposed edges of pieces F and E, and then you're going to add piece A so that it matches up on the corners. This is going to create the back of your chair. Once it's put together, it should look something like this. Now we are going to put the back together with the seat of the chair. The tab that you see in front is going to be inserted into the tab of the chair. I'm first adding glue to all the areas that I know the pieces will touch. If you want to dry fit it first so you can see where the glue needs to go, that might be a good idea. Once you've added your glue, insert the chair back into the chair seat, and then you can reinforce it with any glue if you see any weak spots. Your completed chair will look like this. Now we're going to move on to the 1/24 scale version. It is the same steps, except you're gluing together 3 C pieces and 3 D pieces. And whenever I show steps for the 1/24 scale version, I will put this yellow text up in the left corner so you know that I'm referring to the smaller kit. Glue your C and D pieces together, matching up the rounded front, and set it to the side to dry. This is going to be the chair seat. Now we're going to move on to the chair back, which is again very similar to the 1/12 scale version. You're going to put the 2 F pieces, making sure that the smaller edge is pointing up on piece B. Once they are glued correctly, it should look something like this. And now we're going to grab piece E and we're going to glue the longer side of piece E. It really doesn't matter if it's the longer side or the shorter side. Glue one of the sides of piece E to piece B along the edge just above the tab so that it looks like this. Add glue to the exposed edges of piece E and both pieces marked F, and then glue piece A to the opposite side so that you have a chair back that looks like this. Now you can dry fit it to your chair seat to make sure everything is working correctly, and wherever you see the pieces touching, add some glue. We're going to insert the chair back into the chair seat, making sure the tab is going into the opening, and then hold it in place until the glue takes hold. You can use hot glue or tacky glue for either one of these. I prefer tacky glue for 1/24 scale so that I can keep all of my bulk down. Hot glue tends to add more bulk. Now that the interior structure of my chair is complete, I can move on to the upholstery. The upholstery is going to be taken from my comfy chair, so it may look a little different, but the steps are all going to be similar. It's now time to upholster, so be sure to grab your quilt batting and whatever fabric you're choosing for this project. I'm going to start adding my quilt batting to the top of my chair seat. I'm going to do a couple layers here. They don't have to be super neat. Just kind of think about once fabric is added over it. And if you want to do a test to see what it will look like, you can just kind of squish fabric on top of it to see if you like how it's looking. I'm adding 3 layers on the top and just kind of going with a shape that I think works for the back of the chair. You can change this up and do whatever shapes you like. I'm adding this with tacky glue. That seems to be a really good glue for holding all of the pieces in place. We're only adding quilt batting to the front of the chair back, to the top of the chair seat, and for the 1/12 scale version only, we will be adding a strip of batting that's going up the side, across the top of the back, and down the other side. This is going to help cover up some of those gaps that are in our cardboard construction and make it a little bit easier to upholster. Once you have that strip, you can cut off any excess and you should be done with the quilt batting portion of this project. You can now get out whatever fabric you are covering your chair in. Here is the 1/24 scale covered in batting. As you can see, we do not have the strip that's going up and over the side of the chair, so leave that blank. This helps keep the bulk of the chair down so it looks like it's staying more in the 1/24 scale range. We're going to start adding our fabric over the chair seat first. You want to make sure that it's mostly flat and you want to iron it before adding your fabric on if you see any wrinkles. I'm starting with a 4" by 4" square, but you can do a smaller square than that, maybe 3 inches by 3 inches. And I'm going to hem one edge with just a little bit of glue. When you're adding glue to fabric, make sure you don't add too much because you don't want it to seep through the front of the fabric and leave a glue mark. To add the fabric to the chair, I'm first adding some glue into the crease between the chair seat and the chair back, and then I'm adding glue all around the edge of the chair seat. I don't want to add it to the very top of the chair because I don't want to risk glue coming through the top of my chair upholstery. So now I'm pushing it into the glue and then smoothing the edges of the fabric over the side of the chair so that it gets into the glue and starts to take hold. I'm making sure that my fabric is pushed as far back into that chair crease as possible, and then I'm going to start cutting the excess fabric away from the edge of the chair. I don't want it to extend past the bottom of the chair seat. Here you can see it's about a 1/2 inch worth of fabric. Then I can go around and add glue, making sure that I'm pushing the chair fabric down onto the cardboard and letting the tacky glue take hold. When it comes to the corners of the chair, I'm adding a little bit of extra glue in that corner flap, and then I'm going to push the flap together so that it kind of sandwiches the glue in between. You can either cut these pieces off, but for my 1/12 scale version, I'm actually going to be folding them down. To do this, I'm just adding a little dab of glue onto my folded piece and then pushing it down to the back. So it's going to glue backwards onto the side of my chair. And this is how I'm going to handle the corners on the 1/12 scale version. We will do it different when we get to the 1/24 scale. Now I'm going to do the same thing for my fabric that's upholstering the front of the back of my chair. And this is going to be hemmed on one edge, and then I'm going to push that hem into the crease between the back of the chair and the seat. I added glue around the edges just like I did before, and now I am smoothing my fabric into the glue and allowing it to take hold. This is the part of the chair that will catch people's eye the most, so make sure that you take time to smooth it out as best as possible. Once the glue takes hold, you can do the same process of cutting down the fabric so that there's just a little bit extra on the sides. You're going to snip into the area where there is a curve along the side of the chair. You want to snip just almost to the edge, but you want to leave a little bit of fabric that's still connected. You don't want to snip all the way to the quilt batting. This is going to make sure that you don't have any gaps where you can see the quilt batting through your fabric. Once you have your corners snipped, you can add glue to the quilt batting, and then you're slowly going to start folding down the fabric over the quilt batting. As you can see, the snipped edges help it fold down a little bit more smoothly. It won't look great where it's folded down, but that will be covered later. I did want to pop in here and show you the difference in the fancy chair versus the comfy chair. It has a bit more of a squared edge, but you're still going to follow the same steps where you slit the fabric and then glue it down. You want to follow the same steps when it comes to the corners, where you add a bit of glue and then sandwich the corners together. Again, we are going to add glue to the very tip of that and then fold it down along the side of the chair. This is going to be different when we get to the 1/24 scale version. This is how it should look once you've successfully upholstered the chair seat and the front of the chair back. Now we can upholster the back of the chair. You won't need any quilt batting for this area, and you do not need to pre-hem the fabric. You just need a piece that's large enough to cover this area. You're going to add some tacky glue on top of the cardboard. However, you want to make sure that you spread it thin so that none of the drops of glue go through the fabric. Make sure you remove it from your finger if that's what you're using to spread it thin. Then you can lay your fabric on top, making sure that it's centered on the back of your chair. I'm going to push it into the glue and make sure that it's taking hold. We're following the same exact steps we just did for the front of the chair, where you're cutting a strip of fabric around the outside. You're going to snip into the edges in the rounded area and then slowly fold the fabric over. You want to make sure that you don't have too much fabric where the fabric is folding over the front of the chair. You want to make sure it only goes about halfway so that it will be covered with the strip of fabric eventually we will put over the side of the chair. You're also going to push it down over the bottom edge of the chair just underneath the cardboard. And again, at the corners, you're going to add glue, sandwich it, and then you can press them down along the sides. Once you've done this for each corner, this will complete this part of the upholstery, and I will go ahead and show you the same steps but on the 1/24 scale version. The 1/24 scale version is very much the same. You will hem your first square of fabric and push it into the crease and glue it down the sides of the chair like we did before. When you get to the corners, when you add glue and sandwich the glue in between, you are going to want to cut the corners off and not lay them down. When you're working with 1/24 scale, you want to make sure you're keeping down the bulk as much as possible. Again, you are going to do the back just like we did before. However, you are going to cut off the corners, as you can kind of see here, even though I did it off of camera. You're going to cut those corners off so that you have nice crisp corners without any edges laying down. We're following the same steps for the back of the chair, making sure that you don't have too much fabric where it's coming around to the front that you already upholstered, and then cutting off any of the excess corners. And that's how you complete the upholstery section of this part of the chair. Now we're going to move on to the strips that cover up all of the rough edges we just created. We are now switching back over to the fancy chair. I followed the exact same steps as was done in the comfy chair, and these are my finished chair bodies. And now we can continue with the strips. As I mentioned, these are going to cover the edges. They are a bit different for this chair, so it has its own section. I'm taking the 1/2 inch thick piece of cardstock from my cardstock sheet, and I'm going to cover it with matching fabric. This piece is going to go over the top of the chair back and down the sides. I'm going to first pre-bend it so I know where all of my edges are going to meet, and then once I'm happy with the shape, if you would like, you can go ahead and fold it a little bit more if you want really squared off corners. But I'm going to make sure that I like the fit, and then once I do, I can add glue to the back of the cardstock and my fabric, and then slowly add it to my chair, making sure that I'm keeping the fabric covered strip centered as I go down the side of the chair. It won't cover the entire side, and so that's why I'm making sure it stays centered. It's a little bit longer than it needs to be, so cut off any excess of the cardstock strip at the bottom of the chair. We're now going to cover the 5/8 inch thick piece of cardstock with fabric, just as we did before, and this is going to be centered on the front seat of the chair. Just like we did last time, I am going to pre-bend it, and we want to make sure that it is covering up the remaining cardboard. It needs to be even with the very bottom edge of your cardboard chair seat. I'm adding glue to the front and the sides, but I am not adding glue to the pieces that are going to touch the back of the chair yet. First, add it to the front of your chair and slowly bend it around the entire chair so that it glues down and covers up the edges of your previously glued down cardboard strip that went across the back and the sides. It should be even with the bottom of your chair. Let this dry completely. Do not glue down the back edges yet. The reason we're waiting for it to dry first is because you are going to have to force these cardstock pieces to bend down. This is going to leave a little gap in the corner of your chair, but that is okay. It should be strong enough to hold up. I'm first test fitting my strip and finding where it's going to hit the center of the back of my chair. I cut it off straight and then fray checked the end, which I did not show here, but fray checking just means you add glue to the end of the fabric so it doesn't unravel. To try to get the other side to match up perfectly, I am slowly cutting it down a little bit at a time until it fits perfectly up against the previously glued piece. For extra insurance that your fabric won't unravel, you can add a tiny line of glue where these two pieces come together, and this will make sure that your fabric does not unravel over the years. You have now completed the upholstery part of this project, and I will show you quickly how to do the 1/24 scale. We are going to start with a 1/4 inch wide piece of paper. You're going to cover that in fabric carefully because this is very thin paper. You want to pre-bend it in place so you like the fit, and then once you know that you like how it's fitting against your chair, you're going to add glue and then glue it down slowly, making sure everything is stuck in place. You really want to push into those corners to make sure it's laying down flat. The strip will be longer than you need, so cut off any excess at the bottom of the chair. We are now going to cover a piece that is 5/16 inch wide. This piece is going to cover your chair seat. You want to pre-bend it into place, starting at the front of the chair and then bending it around the back. You want to make sure that you have even amounts sticking out the back so you have enough room to make these pieces come together in the center. Glue it in place, and then we're going to follow the same steps where we're forcing the back end to bend down so that these two pieces can meet in the center of the back of your chair. You will get little gaps on this chair as well, just like we did for the 1/12 scale, and that is okay. Whether you're doing the 1/12 scale or the 1/24 scale, this is how they should look once you're done upholstering your pieces. We can now move on to creating the mat board arms and legs that are going to be attached to your chair. To begin assembling the arms, you want to lay your pieces out mirrored just as you see here on your work surface. We are going to start with piece G3. This piece is going to be glued on top of piece G2. As you're gluing these on top of each other, you're going to line up the center cutout. The center cutout should be even all the way around, and so should the bottom of these two pieces. We are now going to glue piece G4, which has the opening cut in the bottom, on top of the previous two pieces. So now we have stacked up piece G2, G3, and G4. Do the same steps for the other mirrored side, gluing them on top of each other. Once that's done, you can finally glue the entire piece on top of piece G1. This is a smaller piece that's going to go on the opposite side, but it will still line up in the center, so make sure your center opening is even all the way around, and you can press the bottom of the arm onto your work surface to make sure it's all completely even. This is how it should look once it's all complete. There is a bit of text on my piece, and your piece may have that too, but eventually we will paint it and you won't see that at all. I'm going to follow the same step for the mirrored arm, and now I have two arm pieces that are mirrored to each other, and they are going to work with our chair. We are now going to glue the two H pieces together. These are going to be the base that our chair is going to sit on. It's also going to be the base that our arms sit on top of as well. At this point, I suggest sanding these pieces very carefully with the sandpaper provided in your kit. This will give it a more carved look, which is what we're going for. We want it to look more like wood that's been worn over the years. You can do this to the edge of your H pieces as well. You want to sand your mat board gently and never sand up against the edge of the paper as it might tear it up. Dry fit your chair on top of your piece H. You want to go ahead and get a feel for how this chair goes together. One of the reasons for that is that piece H can be a little bit long. If you are using a thicker fabric, you may need this length, but because my fabric is fairly thin, I'm going to cut off the edges and I'm going to round out the back a little bit too. This is up to you. You can also just leave it how it is. I'm going to cut off the excess, and then I'm just going to cut down my corners. This is the back of the chair, so it's not really that big of a deal to most people. You can kind of make it however you feel like you want it to look. So there is still a little bit of mat board sticking out the back, but I feel like it's better fitted to my chair body. Now I'm going to pre-paint the chair arms and piece H, which is the chair base. I'm using brown to make it look like wood, but you can use whatever color you like. I'm first adding a thin coat of acrylic paint, and then I'm going to let that dry and add more coats after that. The arms for the 1/24 scale go together in just the same way, where you're gluing G3 on top of G2, and then G4 on top of G3, and then you're going to glue all of that on top of G1. And you're doing this for both arms so that you have mirrored arms, and also go ahead and glue together your H pieces. And you want to paint them just like we did for the 1/12 scale. Once your paint has dried, we can center and glue the chair body onto the chair base. I'm making sure I have equal width on each side of my chair base so that I have enough room to add my arms to the chair. I'm going to let that dry and then I can add my chair arms. Here you can see the proper placement of the chair arm. The back of the chair arm is only about halfway through the side of the back of the chair, and then it's sitting up against the chair seat. And the small reveal in piece G4 is showing on the outside. So that's how you know you have it on the correct side of the chair. I'm adding tacky glue so I know I have enough working time to get the chair arm in the correct place, and I'm going to do this for both sides, making sure that they line up similarly and I have a mirrored piece. I'm going to let this all dry completely before I do any more on the chair. This is how it should look once everything is in place. We can now move on to the legs of the chair, which are made from pieces I, J, and K. We're going to start with 4 pieces marked I. These are going to be the side rails for the chair legs. I'm gluing 2 of each together. They should match up perfectly on the edges. For the front and back legs, you now need to glue K2 on top of K1 and J2 on top of J1. This will give a little fancier of a reveal once they're put together. This also strengthens the very delicate pieces so they're a bit stronger. The J pieces are your front legs and the K pieces are going to be the back legs attached to your chair. We're going to start with the front legs of the chair, which is piece J. It's a little bit longer than piece K if you have the 2 mixed up, and we're going to glue it as close to the front edge of the chair as we can. The front edge is a little bit rounded, so you will have to get it as close up as you can. Now we're going to dry fit the 2 side rails with our chair kind of laying on its face on our work surface. This is going to help us know where we need to glue the side rails so we can get everything in place properly. Alternatively, you can put all of the legs together on your work surface without putting them onto the chair first. I didn't think about this until after I had put all of my chairs together. But for the process I'm showing you now, I'm using a pencil to mark where my back legs need to sit and gluing those along the back of my chair, allowing that to dry. Now I know I have the correct space between my side rails so that I can glue them in place, gluing them to the bottom of my chair base, and then also attaching them to the front and back legs of my chair. I'm doing this for both sides, and they do fit perfectly, even though it was a little bit of a complicated process to get to this point. The arms and legs process for the 1/24 scale is exactly the same. We're first going to glue our chair body onto the H pieces that are glued together and glue that down, centering it so we have equal space on either side. I'm then going to use tacky glue to glue the arms on so that they are in the right location. The back of the chair arm is centered about halfway in the side of the back of the chair. So now those are in place and I'm going to let them dry. For the legs, I'm gluing the I pieces together first. These are going to be my side pieces for the chair legs. I'm doing this for both sides of my chair. And then I'm gluing together my J and K pieces just like I did for the 1/12 scale. It's a bit trickier to fit the legs on the bottom of the 1/24 scale because it's so small. So what I did was add glue where it needed to be, add that to the bottom of my chair, and then slowly adjust them as I needed to. So I just kind of worked quickly while my glue was still wet and adjusted as needed. But as I said previously, you could also pre-put your chair legs together just separately and then glue your chair base on, and that may be a better option for the 1/24 scale. Back to the 1/12 scale, now we can do a light sand on these pieces just like I did on the arms, and then paint them as you did for the arms. The reason we don't have to paint these first is because these pieces are not near the fabric. I don't have clips of me painting the 1/24 scale, but you're just going to paint it however you like. And this is the finished look for the 1/12 scale and the 1/24 scale fancy chair kit from Bentley House Minis. I hope you enjoyed putting it together. I really do like this chair, and if you want to learn more about either one of these scales in this chair kit specifically, you can go to bentleyhouseminis.com. You can also follow the link in the description to learn about our other kits as well. Thank you for watching.